Welcome back to Unapologetically Visible, the podcast for high achieving Latina and women of color founders who are done being the best kept secret. I'm your host, Christina Olivarez, award winning visibility and leadership coach, TEDx speaker, and founder and CEO of the Social Butterfly Gal and Hustle and Socialize. There is a very specific kind of discomfort that I've been sitting with lately. I've noticed it in my own life, but even more with the women that I coach. These moments that I'm feeling the discomfort are often mentioned in our coaching calls, where many of my clients pause mid sentence and you can feel that there's something deeper that they quite don't know how to articulate yet. It keeps showing up. And when it does, this is what it sounds like. Christina, I don't know what is wrong with me. I feel off and I can't fully explain what I'm feeling. I feel disconnected from my business, from my work, from myself, and none of it makes sense because on paper, everything looks fine. Christina, I thought I would feel more confident by now. I thought I would feel more certain at this level, but I don't. What stands out to me isn't just what they're saying, but who is saying it. Because the clients that I coach are Latinas who have built something real and tangible. They are women who are respected and capable and deeply thoughtful in how they move in their business. And they're not new to this. They are established, which is exactly why this experience feels very disorienting. Because when you have been the woman who knows how to figure things out, who can create all the results, who can move through these challenges with a certain level of clarity and decisiveness, you don't expect to arrive at a moment where things feel very unclear in a way that isn't easily solved. So the instinct becomes to turn inward and to start evaluating. Many of my clients start thinking that something needs to be fixed, that maybe something is missing in their strategy, or maybe there's a better strategy that they haven't worked with. And that's why they come to me for coaching, because they're looking for that strategy. But I'm here to tell you that there are seasons where your external reality hasn't quite caught up to the internal shifts that are already taking place inside of you. You've changed in many ways, but you are not yet fully expressed in how you're operating, how you're making decisions, or how you're leading. And that space makes it feel like something is off. It's easy to start questioning yourself when you're going through this. You start questioning your clarity, your capability, and your direction. But what you're standing in is a threshold, a moment where your identity is expanding faster than your current way of operating can hold. And if you don't understand that, it can feel like something is wrong when in reality, it's just shifting. That's what we are going to unpack in today's episode. I'm going to walk you through this with a level of depth because it's going to help you make sense of what you are feeling. In this episode, we're going to explore three things together. We'll start by looking at what it actually means to outgrow your current identity and how to recognize when you are experiencing is part of the natural evolution of yourself, your brand, and your business. And then we are going to talk about that discomfort that you're feeling, why it feels the way it does, why so many high achieving women misread that experience and try to correct something that actually doesn't need fixing. And finally, we are going to get to what this next level is asking of you, especially when the feedback that you're used to is relying on something less immediate. By the end of this conversation, my intention is simple: to give you tools to help you be able to understand this with a sense of depth and self-trust in this current season, and to give you a little preview of how I coach my clients, specifically in phase one of my signature framework, Visibility to Legacy, which phase one is all about identity recalibration. I want you to leave with a deeper sense of self-trust in this current season that you're holding, and the ability to recognize this moment not as something to fix or solve, but as something that you're being asked to step into with a different level of awareness and leadership. How many of you here feel like you are outgrowing your identity? Now, I know I can't see you, but feel free to send me a message on Instagram and share what you're currently experiencing when it comes to your identity, specifically around yourself and your business. I have felt this more times than I can count. especially throughout the last couple of years. I would say maybe in the last 3 years in particularly, but more so in 2025 when it came to all of the pivots that I was doing after a very, very tough season where I realized that the current business model that I was operating in for the last 3 years was in misalignment with the identity that I had been shifting into, that I was morphing into. And thinking just about like reimagining my life and business for that next chapter of becoming a mom, a CEO, and for the next decade of my business after I hit the first decade of it. I see so many women that I coach quietly misinterpret what they're experiencing because the way that this confusion shows up doesn't really match the language that we have been given for when it comes to growth. Automatically, we think growth is the ability to see positive spikes in our revenue and our clientele and all of the external things that we do. And obviously, that is growth 100%. But it's easy to call what we're experiencing from an identity level as confusion. When decisions that once felt obvious now take longer, or when the way that we used to move doesn't really carry the same conviction, when our work still functions, but it doesn't feel as connected as it once did, that's where you start thinking that there is confusion in the way that you're operating and that something has gone off track. But what I see time and time again in my own life and with the women that I coach is that this moment is rarely about confusion. It's about a gap that begins to form between who you become and who you're still operating on a day-to-day basis. From the outside, very little looks different, but internally, there is a quiet awareness that something about the way that you're currently moving no longer reflects you. There's a version of you that built what you have today. She learned how to be resourceful in ways that were not optional and figured things out in real time. She made decisions quickly, often caring more than she should because she knew how to make things work. And there was a level of rhythm, a certain rhythm in how she operated, a level of urgency that kept things moving, and a level of proving that helped her establish credibility, especially in rooms where she always wasn't fully seen in yet. That version of you was necessary. She created the results, built the momentum, and got you here. But there comes a point where those very traits that once created growth begin to feel heavier to carry. You notice it already in how you make decisions, how you show up in your content, and in the energy behind your work. What once felt supernatural starts to feel like something that you have to push through. I've lived that. In fact, all last year, there was a lot of decisions that I felt that I was making because I should be making them. I was not in alignment with my conference anymore. And I was recognizing it and it was hurting me very much so. I did not want to do it. It was making me feel angry and frustrated, and it was making me hate what I had built. And that was really difficult because I was starting to hate what I had built, but I had a commitment to pushing through and getting through it. And I honored that commitment. And that is where most women assume that something needs to be fixed. I felt that. Immediately, I wanted to dive into that mode of fixing it and figuring out, like, why isn't this working anymore? But in my reality, I was recognizing something far more precise than solving or fixing. I was recognizing that the identity that built that current level was designed for a specific season of my life in my business, and I was no longer aligned with that season of my life and my business. Whew, that was big. And as you expand, it becomes less about abandoning her and more about recognizing that she no longer has the full capacity to lead where you are going next. Growth at that level isn't just about adding new strategies or refining what you already know. It requires a deeper shift in how you relate to yourself, how you relate to your work, and the way that you measure progress. Because the feedback loops begin to change. The things that once told you, this is working, start to become quieter. That validation that used to come quickly is now taking longer to build. And the pace that once felt like momentum starts to feel misaligned with the level of leadership that you're actually stepping into. And if you are not grounded in what is actually happening, it could feel like your whole entire life in business is unraveling. There's also a layer of this that is rarely acknowledged, and that is the emotional weight of outgrowing a version of you that you yourself deeply respect. You are not just shifting in how you operate, you're loosening your attachment to the ways that you used to measure your value, to the ways that you knew you were doing a good job, to the patterns that once gave you a sense of certainty. And there is a quiet grief in that. And it's not because that you want to go back to that version, but it's because of how that version made you possible. Like the you that you are right now, that was that old version. So when things became delete, so when things begin to feel off, when your work starts feeling different, when your decision making starts feeling slower or more deliberate, it's not a sign that something is broken. It can be an indication that your identity is expanding and your current way of operating hasn't fully caught up yet. And when you start to see it in that way, what once felt like confusion starts to feel like a transition that is going to require a different level of awareness and leadership from you. I used to think that expansion meant more money. Immediately, when somebody would ask me anything dealing with expansion, I would always talk about revenue. I would always talk about expanding into these big numbers that I really thought I wanted for myself. When I thought about growth, I thought it meant to go big or go home, to add more to my plate, to just really think big. Don't think small, just big and more and more and more and more. I had a very linear way of thinking because expansion doesn't necessarily mean more. And expansion can feel so uncomfortable because expansion can also mean expanding inward. The kind of growth that you don't see on a P&L statement, on a balance sheet, or in your team. Expansion can definitely mean that you are stepping into a very different type of leadership than what you thought that you wanted to go. And it requires letting go of things that you thought that you once wanted. And growth and expansion in that way doesn't always resemble the kind of growth that we learn to recognize, especially what we hear on the internet. There's a certain kind of discomfort that comes with stretching into a new level. Oh my goodness, how I could talk about that discomfort from time to time to time again, because I've experienced it and I've seen my clients experience it too. That discomfort is so just, it feels like you're being in a game of tug of war. And every day that you wake up, the discomfort is so loud. It is so noisy, and it feels, the best way I can describe it is that level of discomfort feels like you are on the edge of a cliff and you are trying to figure out if you are going to go back and fall off the cliff or you're going to go back and go on to a different level. There was a season where I could feel that something within me had shifted. My standards had evolved, my capacity had deepened, and my tolerance for how I worked and how I showed up had definitely changed. I was operating from a very different lens, especially from my visibility. And this is often the work that I do in one-on-one coaching is create visibility filters. Because when you are stepping into a new identity, the filter that you operate in when it comes to your visibility is definitely going to change. You're going to have higher standards. You're going to have higher ways of deepening with your capacity. It's not always going to be the same every single season. And when I was going through this, externally, there wasn't immediate evidence to match what I was feeling and what I was building. The same strategies that I had used to create quick responses felt louder than they needed to be. And the same pace that once felt super productive started to feel like I was moving ahead of myself. I remember sitting with that tension. And it felt like something was asking me to move differently before I fully had proof of moving differently could actually work. And that tension was the worst place to be in. And so I understand it when I coach my clients, because for many high achieving women, especially Latina and women of color leaders, We have been conditioned to understand ourselves through the pressure. We learn how to trust ourselves when we could immediately see that cause and effect. So when the intensity softens and the feedback isn't as immediate or obvious, it can feel like something is off. This is where your nervous system starts trying to reorient you. There's a pull towards what used to work. There is a familiarity that feels super grounding, especially when you're in a season where things are shifting. But that doesn't often mean alignment. And what begins to change at this level is the quality of feedback that you're learning to listen to. There's a difference between feedback that is immediate and feedback that is meaningful. And when you start stepping into a level where your work is designed to attract a more discerning, more thoughtful buyer, that feedback loop naturally stretches you. Right now, people are taking longer to decide, especially when it comes to an investment of their time, their energy, and their money. They are not taking things at face value. They are doing their due diligence to binge your body of work. Because there is this trust recession. We are inundated with AI, and many people can just go on to ChatGPT or Claude and get a specific answer that they're looking for. So when it comes to like thinking about investing in your offers or your products, there is a huge level of discernment that people are making right now. And if you're still measuring your effectiveness by how quickly something is landing, it will feel like you're losing momentum, even when you're building something far more sustainable. What this level begins to ask of you is a different kind of trust. That trust comes from discernment, from knowing when something in your business model and your life is aligned before it is even validated. And that's the biggest shift. The one that I see the most in my clients is understanding how to be discerning with how they lead, how they step into their new identity, because you're no longer looking for constant confirmation that you're on the right path. You are learning from that level of discernment how to hold your position, even when the response is quieter, slower, or more refined. That requires a level of internal stability that most people do not talk about. But every woman at this level eventually has to develop. It is a skill. But when we think about skill building, one of the other skills that we have to understand about shifting into a new identity is the grief that surfaces when you begin to outgrow a version of yourself that you actually respect. Grief is so powerful. And when we think about shifting into the different seasons in life and our business, the biggest discomfort of them all is grief. I had to really come to terms with this in my own life and business last year, where I had to grieve bits and pieces of myself and the business model that I had created, all of the ways that I needed validation. And to this day, I'm still grieving bits and pieces of her because the Christina and the business that got me here to this point is not the Christina in the business that's going to lead me to my next level and my next chapter. And that is so hard to really understand and to have an idea of, oh, I have to let that go. And I see that with my clients all the time as well. Many of you are no longer fully identified with the old version of yourself. You are still stabilizing into a new identity. And there's this period where things don't really feel fully anchored. When you understand what you're actually standing in, that's when you start to see that this isn't a moment to go back to that old identity. It's the moment to stay present long enough to stabilize into a different level of self-leadership. Like I said, I've been inside of this recalibration in my own way, looking at what I built for the last decade, what created results, what shaped my identity as a leader, and recognizing that some of those ways that I was operating in are no longer a current match for the level and the pace that I'm actually going. And that requires a level of honesty that isn't always comfortable. It requires you to make decisions without the same kind of urgency that you may have relied on before, to allow things to evolve without forcing them into a timeline that feels familiar. Honesty is probably one of the most beautiful gifts that you could ever have as an entrepreneur, Because when you actually slow things down and when you start peeling the layers, especially when you do that in a safe way with a coach or a guide, a mentor, then you can get really honest with yourself. And I will say that a lot of women are not ready for that honesty. It takes a very specific kind of woman, a specific season in your life, and a moment where you are done with your bullshit. And you definitely need someone to give you that tough love, to be super honest. But most importantly, you yourself have to be ready to get very honest with who you are right now and what you want to become. And if you're navigating something similar, I want to take you through some real-time coaching techniques that maybe will help you get more clear and honest with yourself, maybe ready to take the next step into action. But these real-time coaching techniques are what I use with my coaching clients when we are looking at their identity and getting very honest with themselves. I'm going to take you through a series of really clear coaching questions and hope that these tools will allow you to see things just a little bit more clear. So the first question I want you to sit with is this: where in your business are you still operating from a version of you that you have already outgrown? I want you to look at how you are showing up in your content, not just what you're saying or the types of content that you're doing, but the energy that you are putting behind it. Then I want you to look at your current offers, how they are structured, how they are positioned, and how you talk about them publicly. Then I want you to take a look at how you are selling, the conversations that you are currently having right now with prospects, the way that you are guiding people into decisions. Look at what you are tolerating in your schedule, in your standards, in your expectations. Where do you feel that disconnect? Where you know you're capable of leading at a higher level, but something in your execution hasn't fully caught up yet. The second question requires a different kind of honesty. What are you using as proof that something isn't working? That might actually be evidence that you're in a different level. I want you to pay attention to what you are measuring. Is it the speed of response, the immediacy of engagement, the volume of the feedback? How quickly are you assigning meaning to those things? And then there's the third question. Are you trying to make this next level feel like your last level so that it feels familiar enough to trust? Are you adjusting your standards, your pace, and your decisions so that you can recreate a sense of comfort? Because when you do that, you begin to shape your leadership around what you already know how to hold instead of allowing it to expand you into what you are capable of holding next. What I have seen at this level, both in my own evolution and the women that I coach, is that the shift isn't about adding more. It's about refining what's already in existence with a higher level of precision. There's a level of clarity that begins to emerge when you stop negotiating your decisions based on comfort and start making them from a place of truth. And that is the work that I do inside of my private coaching. My private coaching is a 6-month coaching container where you are met at the level that you are actually operating in and guided through the decisions that are going to shape your next chapter. We take a look at your business, your visibility, your leadership, your authority, and identify what is no longer aligned, what needs to shift, and what you are ready to commit to next. If you have been listening to this conversation, or maybe you have binged many other podcast episodes, and there's a part of you that feels seen in a way that you haven't been able to fully articulate, private coaching is where we do this work together. It's where your identity and visibility and your leadership are recalibrated in a way that reflects who you become, not who you used to. And I'm inviting you to apply to work with me. You can apply through the link in the show notes below or send me a DM on Instagram and we will kick off a conversation around that. If you feel like you are on the edge of this and you want a space to think and process and get clear before making a long-term decision, you can always start with a 90-minute intensive. I want you to give yourself the space to see what's actually happening and make a grounded decision and then move forward with intention. If you resonated with this episode, here's what I want you to do next. Subscribe and leave a review because that helps this podcast reach more women like us, women who were never meant to stay hidden, women who are meant to be highly visible leaders. Share this episode with someone you love who is going through the quiet tensions of stepping into a new identity in their life and their business. And DM me on Instagram at the Social Butterfly Gal. Tell me your biggest reframe and your biggest breakthrough from today's conversation. And if you're feeling the call to go deeper, to recalibrate your personal brand, leadership, and your visibility, I would love to support you through one-on-one coaching. You can find the coaching information and offers in the links in the show notes below, or send me a DM with the word coaching, and I will personally walk you through what offers are in alignment with your current season and what it looks like to step into this next era with clarity, confidence, and unapologetic authority. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening and for all of the shares and reviews. Remember this, you didn't come this far to play safe. You came here to be unapologetically visible. I'll see you next week.